Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aparutade sangamatassa tawara Sodavanta Bamunjantu Satang. So this splendid autumn day, and my time here in Temple Forest Monastery is getting closer to the end. In a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, I'll go back to England. And so to reiterate, the purpose of these talks are reflections. They encourage all of us to practice following the teachings of the Lord Buddha. Because worldly dhammas are very powerful, and there's so much confusion everywhere. Here in the United States and the UK is going through a very complicated political time and economic problems. So the world and the war in Ukraine and on like that, you hear reports in African countries. Who's content? Who's satisfied with anything? And this discontentment, dissatisfaction is the way that we've been educated to conceive of better possibilities for our lives, taking everything very personally, seeing that what one believes one is so important, or even to think that you're totally unimportant. So this illusion of a separate self means that contentment and satisfaction you can't find in the world because it's constantly changing, and no matter how the political system might be, the religious teachings that you ascribe to, as long as one is grasping the conventions, no matter how good the conventions are, then that's the way to be discontented. Because one can always imagine the future holds something better. Or as you get older, then you reflect on the past. And so, you find people remembering the past and the good old days in the United States. And I can't remember good old days. So, and I've had a lot of time living. And then when I chanted the Aparuta de Sangamatassa Taura, the gate to the deathless is open. And then the Buddha says, Ye Sodavanta Bamunjandu Satang. It means trust in this simple statement of the Buddha in this Theravadan tradition. So the gate to the deathless, what is that? It's words, and American culture doesn't talk about deathless, except they want to live forever. Immortality on a physical level, which is totally impossible. But the deathless then is to trust in that. The gate to the deathless is open for those who are listening. Trust in this statement. It's proclamation, in fact. And then what is the deathless in terms of, can you imagine deathlessness? Can you create images of deathlessness? And you can't, it's beyond imagination. It's not an image, it's a reality that we realize through awareness. And it's in trusting this awareness of the way it is, that right now in this present moment is like this, just that simple reminder. So, like when we take refuge in Dhamma, what do we mean by that? And, we're quite willing to chant the Pali words or Thai words and believing there's something called Dhamma, but it also is apparent here and now, timeless. So it's a word that conveys the reality, ultimate reality, absolute reality that we take refuge in. So when we reflect on that, the absolute reality of this moment is consciousness. Everybody is experiencing consciousness here and now. So we don't take refuge in consciousness, but in Dhamma. In these formulaic traditions that we inherited in this tradition. But consciousness is apparent here and now. Because you're conscious, that's a fact that you can't deny. Any of you can't deny that you're conscious right now. You might be thinking about other things or trying to figure out what that means, but when the direct question, are you conscious now, you have to say yes. So that's apparent for every one of us. Conscious and awareness here and now, or Dhamma. So there's Dhamma, there's consciousness. Consciousness then couldn't manifest forms if there was no space. So there's consciousness, space, and then the forms that manifest in space, made of earth, fire, water, and air, elements that have forms, that have qualities. So just this simple outline is important to investigate. Dhamma is our refuge, consciousness is here and now, space, and then forms manifest in space. And so the suffering we experience is always attachment to the forms. So some of the forms, they can have all kinds of qualities, good and bad, right and wrong. And so bodies are forms, and we have strong conditioning to identify with our physical body. And we're conditioned to believe that we are this limited form because we've never reflected on reality here and now. We've been culturally conditioned to believe that our true nature is a physical form, a condition of some sort. It can be healthy, unhealthy, male or female, black or white, and these forms have different qualities. But they all arise in space and in space and consciousness. So, what is your true identity then? These changing conditions that we've been told to believe in, our reality, the real world that we live in. So being a Buddhist monk, and living in a non-Buddhist country, people keep, they say, why are you escaping the real world? And so, the question that many people, non-Buddhist people, believe the real world is the world they've created in their minds, they've been conditioned to believe in. And then we tend to, they have these kind of biased images of monks meditating or yogis contemplating their navels and not getting married, not paying their taxes, not getting a mortgage, and we're kind of copping out on life by living in forests, like here at Temple Forest Monastery. But the real world, I believed the real world was that type of conditioning, because that's how I was brought up, to believe in what I'd been conditioned to believe in. You didn't have much choice. As when you're a child, you're innocent, you're open, you just you're like a sponge, you absorb everything. You don't reflect if it's true or false yet. But what your parents tell you, what the society tells you, what the religion tells you, you tend to believe that. But Dhamma is reality itself, here and now. So if you're going to identify with something, identify with that. Because that's not personal. You're not conditioned to be, as a person, to be conscious. It's natural. Consciousness is part of nature. Dhamma. So when you really, and this is something that isn't, I expect you to believe, but to reflect upon, to find out what you really are. And that's the whole point of the Buddhist teaching, is signs, pointers to ultimate reality, to conscious awareness here and now, gate of the deathless. And the death, what is death then, but about the four elements? Because they're changing, they're subject, they can manifest or disappear. They have all kinds of qualities, dualistic qualities, from heaven to hell to right and wrong, true and false. And so you can see the conflicts that a society like this country has, because it's full of views and opinions. People's identities are very personal, they take very personally. And political correctness is the word of the day, to not offend anybody by giving them the wrong name or not qualifying them properly, because we believe we are the things we we believe in, that we believe we are. And then it's not that you discredit that, but it is conditioning. It's not natural phenomena, deathless, apparent here and now, timeless. It's all about time, birth and death, right and wrong, good and bad, about heaven and hell. And that you aren't born with those thoughts in your mind. They're not, they're made up conventions that all societies, have different ways, cultural identities, different class identities, gender identities, are all made up to think that one is a human body. So human bodies populate the planet Earth at this time. They're the most dominant species of conditions, and then the problems that arise from that, from being a dominant species where most of this human species believe in their version of the real world, what they've been conditioned to believe in. They don't take refuge in Dhamma, they take refuge in the conditions they acquired. So it's like going back to the source. We oftentimes talk about going to the source, which is conscious awareness. And so consciousness has no birth or death. And it depends on forms to manifest. So we have eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, we have a brain, mind, and consciousness doesn't have a language. It's totally impersonal. And so it can't be, people try desperately to describe consciousness. Psychologists, scientists of the modern age are trying to figure out what consciousness is. Is it the brain, or, giraffes are they conscious? Or, we have certain biases that only human beings are conscious. But all forms are manifestations in consciousness, whether they're giraffes or human beings. So consciousness is unitive. It doesn't prefer anything, like preferring human beings to giraffes. It's not it doesn't think, it doesn't have thoughts. But it's where space and forms can operate. And just reflecting that if there was no consciousness, there couldn't be any space. And if there's no space, there's no forms. And we identify with the lowest denomination, the form. Nobody identifies with space. And consciousness is what you actually are. This universal ultimate reality is to be realized, each one for themselves. So when we chant to be Bajjatang Vaitidapa Varniwe, we realize, the Buddhist teachings are skillful means that we can use, that are still excellent pointers at what is apparent here and now, timeless. And so this is, in monastic life is a whole, you're devoting your time to this reality. That's the purpose of Buddhist monastic samanas. And so, you're dependent, you don't have a job, you're dependent on generosity, and it's a trust in this awareness, in conscious awareness, which doesn't seem like anything when you try to find it or think about it. But as you relax and just open to the present moment, you can't find it through effort. You can't realize it. It's not something you find, but something you realize is real. And when you use a lot of effort to realize Dhamma, then you're operating from the self-view. That you're somebody who has to get the Dhamma or realize the ultimate reality or get enlightened, whatever words you prefer. So just that assumption that you are the body, the physical body, and operating like even as a Buddhist monk, thinking that I'm ordained in order to, as a person, to realize Dhamma, gets in the way, the sense that I'm somebody who's trying to realize Dhamma. Because what you realize through following these teachings of the Buddha is that you're not anything. You're not a thing. And that's the liberation, that's the deathless reality that we are capable of realizing for ourselves. And yet you can still live in the world, operate in ignorant worldly conditions that we live in, without the delusion that you are the conditions that you've been conditioned by, the identities, the worldly identities, the traditional identities, cultural identities are merely conditions that you realize have no soul, no purpose other than living life in a form is like this. So trust is not about belief. It's not believing in Buddhism. Because, it's not about doctrinal positions that we take about whether there's God or not God, or the word Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha are not personal terms. So we take refuge in the Sangha, those who practice rightly, according, that realize the deathless themselves. And this realization takes place in relaxed attention to the present moment. It's like, that's why we use these words. It's like this, because it's not a description of anything. It's just a sign pointing at here and now. It can only be this way. That awareness, whatever you're aware of, can be different from one person to the next. But conscious awareness is finding what you really are, the deathless reality that the Buddha was pointing to in his first sermon, the Four Noble Truths. And the deathless reality is silent. It has no language. the best word you can describe it is silence. Behind all the noise, behind all the forms, or supporting all the forms, all the noise of the world, is silent awareness. So if you're always operating from a separate self position, like my practice, my meditation, then we're caught in clinging to traditional forms or views about practice or Buddhism. But that very clinging to views about anything is the cause of suffering, is clinging, attachment, out of ignorance. So the insight is to let go of the forms, to see that they are impermanent, unsatisfactory. And so when we take refuge in forms, we're attaching to something that's in the process of change. It has no stability. And that's why we're frightened and anxious and worried, because our identity depends on trying to hold on to ideas or conditions whose very nature is changing here and now. There's no stability in what they call the real world. It's all, I remember when they established the United Nations after the Second World War, ideally we thought this is a really good idea, where the United Nations will be a wise group of people to get together, all countries are represented, and we will be able to not have any more wars because we're all reasonable, intelligent people that want peace and stability from the changing conditions that we're blind to. So at the time when the UN was established, I was about 11 or 12 years old. And, I thought that's really, a wonderful idea to have the whole world united in a group that meets, that has representatives to resolve conflicts, and that we can do through being reasonable, sensible, peace-loving beings. Well, that's very idealistic. That's what we'd like it to be. That's how it should be. According to ideals, we should just learn to get along and help each other in the economies, with the politics, and bring peace to the world and keep everything under control through wise leadership, conventions like the United Nations. So then in my life, I've met people working for the United Nations, and they say it's not very peaceful. Because it's an ideal, it's a good idea, no question of that. But how can you unite when people are so different in their conditioning, their cultural biases, their egos, the sense of their separateness, whether they're extroverts or introverts, whether they're men or women, there's all kinds of identities that we thoroughly committed to defending that are in conflict with other identities. So that's why the world at this time is confused, because as much as we have good ideas about how to resolve conflict, how do you resolve conflict when each group think they're right and the other's wrong? So on the worldly level, it's about right and wrong, true and false. And that's the nature of phenomena, of conditions. It's, the conditions are, we believe, are right. And if you don't agree with me, then you're wrong. It seems logical, makes sense. On the reasonable level, because reason is a function of language. The Dhamma, conscious awareness, isn't about right and wrong. Doesn't judge, doesn't pass judgments, doesn't hold views about how things should be. But individual human beings do. And masses of human beings believe in what's right and what's wrong. So in the 1950s, in my youth, there was McCarthyism, in which the United States turned desperately against communism, Soviet Russia, and there was tremendous paranoia when I was in university about communists Reds under the beds. And so, and this was great news. Television was coming into fashion then. And so, the news about many people were destroyed by this, by suspicion, by blame, because to the American propaganda, communism is wrong and democracy is right. Now, these are views. What is communism? What is democracy in reality? When, they're ideas, good ideas. But to this day, communism or socialism in this country are wrong and democracy is right. So we tend to, when politicians blame the other being communists, it's because they don't agree with someone else's idea of democracy. What are they doing? They're grasping ideas, which prejudices them towards the reality of their own humanity. And so we fight over that. Wars still take place. There's so many wars going on this planet at this time. Things like in Africa, Europe. So just to point out that Dhamma isn't judgmental, because judgments are about conditions, about qualities. Is black better than white, or red better than blue? It's a matter of opinion. They're not absolutely right or wrong. They are what they are. But some people prefer red over blue. That's a personal preference. It's not an absolute right. It's personal. It's conditioned. It's biased. The ego is the big obstacle, the sense of this separateness. And yet we can be aware of the ego. The ego, you can't be aware of itself. So the ego is conditioned, so it can be very righteous, all about how things should be, what's right, what's moral, what's good, what everybody should believe in. And they're right in many ways, but that attachment to being right is out of delusion, out of ignorance. we should end wars. We should learn how to get along. We should resolve conflicts with reason and logic. But is the world, the real world, as in quotes, is that really right or wrong? You know, it varies from one individual to the next. So passing judgment is a function of conditioning. You know, so reason and logic are about language. When we get into Dhamma, it's not about language anymore. It's about awareness, here and now. Where the awareness of right and wrong isn't taking sides. Right, being righteous, feeling righteous and virtuous is like this, or feeling unworthy and wrong is like this. And that is awareness of whatever feelings you may be having in the present, what the identities that you cling to, you begin to see are illusions that you create. They're not ultimate reality. So if there's no right and wrong, good or bad, you know, the conditioned realm is all about skillful, unskillful, right and wrong, good or bad. But the deathless is not, doesn't have views, doesn't have words for heaven and hell, male or female. So consciousness, because it's impersonal, not culturally biased, is, when we talk about awareness, conscious awareness, it's the gate, the door to the deathless. And that's available to all of us always, here and now, when you begin to realize that for yourself. So this is, you know, this is the escape from the perplexities of all the conditioning we've received. It's complicated now. People have all kinds of identities and beliefs. Reason and logic are greatly admired and held up as, you know, what's right. We should be reasonable and fair. There should be justice, rule of law, order, respect. All these are right. But can you force these qualities on populations? Can you make people believe in these views that you hold are right? Through what means can you make them do it? Through compulsion, through punishment, through fear, anxiety? You know, you push idealism onto a population of individual conditions. You know, they taking the righteous view, then there's just, you know, you feel oppressed by ideals like communism or democracy. No matter what you call it, no matter what kind of ideal word you have for what is right and fair and just, if it's forced on individuals, what do you feel? When you're being forced, compelled, bullied into believing in that my view is the right one and you should believe it, and I reject you, I punish you if you don't believe it, that is tyranny. So we use tyranny, fear, as a way to punish people who don't conform to one's particular view of what's right. So attachment to ideals is out of ignorance, it's not out of wisdom. we're letting go of conditions is where wisdom operates. Wisdom isn't about being reasonable, it's about knowing the way things are here and now. That all conditions are impermanent. All Dhamma is not personal. So right and wrong, good and bad, true and false, is the world, the created world, the illusory world. And the perplexity of modern life, because we're increasingly well educated with all kinds of modern miracles, technological miracles, modern science, all based on reason and logic, on looking at things through the microscope, through the telescope, giving qualities to different conditions that are perceived through special means, wanting to send people to the moon to live on the moon or Mars. You know, these people believe in alien forces. And so, you know, this is, people have actually seen aliens. So they believe that aliens are real, and most of us have never seen an alien. So aliens don't seem very real to me. Who's right and who's wrong? Am I saying they're wrong because they've actually seen an alien? You know, and that's just superstition. I can make value judgments about it because I haven't seen aliens. So, you know, if I haven't seen them, then if you see them, there's something wrong with your mind, is a value judgment, isn't it? It's me deciding that if you are being totally reasonable, just like I am, then you'll agree with me. But whether you see aliens or not, if you see aliens, there's still impermanent conditions. So the reality of Dhamma still applies to madness, to illusion, to all possibilities, whether it's materialism or spiritualism. You know, then this is what I've always appreciated about Buddha Dhamma is that, you know, the statement, all conditions are impermanent. So in Theravada Buddhism, you have a cosmology, you have Deva worlds and Brahma worlds, and so you have this kind of fascinating cosmology. And then, you know, some people believe in Deva, some people see Devas, or Brahmas, or Virgin Mary, or Jesus. You know, and we, you know, should I say it's an illusion, a delusion of your mind? If you actually see something like that. But is it Dhamma? Is it permanent? One year I was visiting a shrine in Portugal, the Fatima shrine. And some peasant children saw the Virgin Mary in this particular place in central Portugal. And it's become an international shrine they built cathedral and a basilica and all kinds of, thousands of Catholics go there every year. And so, you know, is that, you know, to me, my intellectual mind is, you know, all this is nonsense. That's how I've been conditioned to see things like that. But awareness of I'm thinking this is nonsense, that I trust, not my prejudiced view, my conditioned view about the nature of Our Lady of Fatima, that I'm right and all the rest of people are ignorant. So even we can be perfectly rational, intelligent, scientific about everything, and still be deluded, ignorant, lacking wisdom in understanding ultimate reality. So I offer this for today's reflection.